Well, we're actually conducting experiments right now. Some members of the public, some households are getting a slightly different questionnaire. So we constantly try to improve on the census. I mean, because we want to have a good census and build upon what works and adjust to maybe something that could work better. So we're constantly doing that. We're doing that now, and of course we'll see how the results come out, and then proceed to refine for the 2020 census.
How's your response rate so far? Do you have a rough idea of whether people have done what you've asked them to do?
Well, we're tracking right now what the participation rate is. How many households are returning the questionnaire? We're now over 63%, but there is still time to return the questionnaire. We have a big push coming in the next few days because there is still time, and we ask the public to take those few minutes to answer the questionnaire and to mail it back. It is so important. It leads to a more accurate census and a less costly census. It costs 42 cents to mail back the questionnaire. It costs the government $57 to count a household. So it's very important for the public to make sure they include everybody in the household and mail back the questionnaire. There's still time.
If you set it aside when it came in the mail, you said, oh, I'll get to this, and it just got into a pile of papers, or it's sitting on a table somewhere, and you don't know where it is, can you get another form?
You can. There are about 40,000 places, centers across the country where you can receive assistance and actually get a questionnaire if you think you haven't received one or you think you haven't been counted. And starting on April 12th, you can call our 800 number. We have a couple of 800 numbers and certain information on the internet to get the 800 numbers, and you can ask for a questionnaire, or starting on April 12th, you can actually answer the census by phone.
Wow. Well, Jeffrey Passel, you're a demographer. Does this ask questions that you want to know the answer to?
Well, I like data. I like more data. This is a sort of bare bones census. It's the smallest number of questions basically ever. The race and Hispanic questions are designed to capture a snapshot of what the population looks like. It's not perfect, but what we need to know out of this census is sort of a benchmark going forward. How many people and how many Latinos are in the country, and how people identify as racial groups. Like I said, it's not perfect, but it's a start.
Is self-identification a reliable source of information about communities?
That's an interesting question.
That's why I asked.
I mean, I think what we'd really like to ask people is, what do other people think you are? But we can't do that very well. I mean, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, that's how the census was done. When the enumerator went door to door, the enumerator looked at the person and wrote down what race they were. This lets people take into account their own personal genealogy and how they identify. So it's sort of a compromise between how we can best collect the data and what we'd like to know. And it changes over time. That's the very interesting thing. I spent a lot of my career trying to piece together historical data and make them fit together. And I've concluded that what we're getting at each census is a snapshot of what the country feels like at that time. And in a way, I think that's the best we can do with this, is to ask people what they think, what race is important to them, what ethnic group is important to them.
Clarissa, you're not a demographer, you're a lawyer. Does this tell you what you need to know?
Actually, I'm not a lawyer, but I am an advocate for a Latino civil rights organization, and I would agree with Jeff that now the census is doing a number of different instruments that they put in the field, and I think that this one is a snapshot of the country, and it's important for certain things, but if it was the only thing the census did, it wouldn't be enough. But there are other instruments that are much lengthier that give us additional kinds of information that we also need to be able to do our work well. For us as an organization that works on programs to improve health outcome for Latinos, home ownership, education, in addition to the policy work that we do, all those instruments together are great. I think what makes this particular form so important, and one of the reasons why being short and being accessible is also an important step for the census to take, is that every 10 years, we need that snapshot that it's not an estimate, it's not a measure of a certain amount of people in the country from which we project, but we really make that expansive effort to go out there and count everybody. And for Latinos who in the last 2 decades, but particularly people are starting to take notice over the last 10 years, have become a national community. We are in states where we weren't associated with before. This count is so important to continue documenting that and how it affects the makeup of communities across the nation.
So the government is actually helping you do your work, right? Because by knowing how many people have finished so many years of school, how many people live in large households, how many people below the age of 18 there are in self-identified Latino households, these are things that it's really handy for you to know.
Absolutely.
And there's no other way for you to know it.
Absolutely. When NCLR started in '68, one of the things that we always had to struggle with, and one of the things that we had to do as an organization, was do a lot of primary research to try to estimate where Latinos were, because there was no data. So since our birth, we've been asking the need to be more accurate in the data that is collected, because it helps us in a variety of ways. It doesn't just help my organization, it helps us as a country to figure out what is the makeup of our communities. You know, I think one of my favorite lines of the census campaign is, if we don't know how many children there are, we don't know how many schools we need. And I think that captures it so beautifully.